The morning began like any other on NBC's Today Show, with the bright studio lights casting a familiar glow across the set and the hosts preparing for yet another round of celebrity interviews. Jason Bateman, known for his wit, charm, and quick tongue honed through decades of acting, was scheduled as the featured guest. His promotional tour for his latest project was already making waves, and expectations for the segment were high. Yet what unfolded was anything but typical banter, as tensions would soon spiral out of control when Bateman clashed unexpectedly with Craig Melvin in a way that caught both the hosts and the audience completely off guard. Jason entered the studio with the calm poise audiences had come to expect, offering a polite smile and nods as he exchanged greetings with the crew. Craig Melvin, seated beside him, opened with standard pleasantries about Bateman's new show and career longevity. At first, everything appeared normal, but keen observers might have noticed the subtle stiffness in Bateman's responses. Perhaps it was the timing of the questions, or perhaps Melvin's tone carried an undercurrent of challenge. Either way, the seeds of confrontation were already being planted beneath the cheerful facade of a morning show segment. As Craig leaned in, he asked a probing question about Bateman's history of playing sardonic, morally complicated characters, pressing him on whether audiences were starting to tire of seeing him in similar roles. The studio momentarily paused, the audience waiting for Bateman's signature sharp but good-natured reply. Instead, Bateman bristled, his brow furrowed slightly, and his measured voice betrayed irritation. He countered sharply that it was reductive to pigeonhole his decades of work into a single typecast, and the air in the room thickened as the usually light-hearted tone shifted into something noticeably edgier. Craig, sensing the change, leaned further, pressing on by pointing out that many critics had raised similar concerns about Bateman's lack of versatility despite his undeniable success. He wasn't mocking, but the bluntness of his phrasing stung. Bateman's eyes narrowed, and he leaned back in his chair before retorting that critics rarely understood the nuance and risk involved in playing layered, restrained characters. He argued that his performances, subtle though they might be, reflected real people more authentically than flamboyant roles often did. The friction was unmistakable, and the casual audience began to sense something explosive might be brewing. What was supposed to be a 5-minute highlight reel of Bateman's career slowly morphed into an unplanned debate. Jason shifted his posture, no longer the easy guest but the defensive professional fighting for recognition of his artistry. Craig, maintaining his composed journalist demeanor, countered by referencing Bateman's latest project reviews, highlighting that some felt it retread familiar ground. The exchange was beginning to feel less like promotion and more like a heated panel discussion, and the other hosts on set exchanged nervous glances, unsure of whether to interject or let the back and forth play out. The tension ratcheted up when Craig asked whether Bateman felt overshadowed by his co-stars in projects like Ozark, where Laura Linney often received equal or greater critical acclaim. Jason's voice, usually calm and witty, cracked with frustration as he defended his role, emphasizing that acting was not about overshadowing but about collaboration. Yet his tone suggested he felt personally attacked, as though Craig was diminishing his achievements. The subtle smiles from other hosts had faded, and the studio's atmosphere shifted palpably from friendly morning chatter to something closer to live drama. Bateman then turned the tables, accusing Craig of framing his questions unfairly, suggesting that the interview was set up to downplay his contributions rather than highlight his success. He pointed out that many interviews focused on sensational or confrontational narratives rather than genuine curiosity. The audience, sitting just off camera, murmured audibly as Jason's composure slipped. Craig, undeterred, calmly responded that it was his job as a journalist to ask tough questions, not to provide a publicity softball. The clash of perspectives crystallized, promotion versus probing. By this point, the producers were beginning to shuffle nervously behind the cameras, wondering if they should cut to commercial early. Yet Jason pressed on, doubling down with fiery remarks about how the media frequently undermine actors by painting them with narrow labels. He accused Craig of participating in the very cycle that made Hollywood so toxic, where an actor's range was measured not by craft but by box office appeal and surface perception. Craig shot back, reminding Jason that media coverage was part of the industry ecosystem that helped build careers, including his own. The argument veered personal when Craig questioned whether Jason's sometimes prickly reputation in interviews might contribute to misunderstandings about his artistry. Jason's face reddened slightly as he snapped that he had never been difficult, only honest, and that honesty in Hollywood was often mistaken for arrogance. He criticized Craig for perpetuating stereotypes about celebrities being ungrateful whenever they challenged the media. The back and forth was now raw and unscripted, and viewers at home began flooding social media with reactions, some siding with Jason, others with Craig. In an attempt to regain control, Savannah Guthrie tried to interject with a lighter comment about Jason's comedic roots, but Jason quickly brushed it aside, determined to address Craig directly. His voice rose, not in yelling but in firm defiance, as he demanded that Craig acknowledge the depth of his performances across both comedy and drama. Craig, maintaining his composure, replied that he respected Jason's career but felt the audience deserved candor about repeated patterns in his roles. The clash had moved beyond disagreement into a full-on ideological standoff about art, media, and respect. The camera operators, sensing the weight of the moment, tightened their focus on Jason's face as he gestured with growing intensity. He accused Craig of deliberately steering the interview toward conflict, suggesting it was for ratings rather than substance. Craig denied it flatly, insisting that his job was to cut through rehearsed answers. The conversation, raw and unscheduled, had taken on the rhythm of a heated debate program rather than a morning shop-off piece. Each word seemed to land heavier than the last, amplifying the spectacle. Jason leaned forward, his voice tinged with frustration but also passion, arguing that playing understated characters required immense discipline and subtlety. He compared it to musicianship, noting how some of the greatest performances in history were not flashy solos but collaborative harmonies. Craig listened but remained skeptical, pointing out that television was, after all, a visual medium that rewarded spectacle. The philosophical clash between substance and spectacle became the centerpiece of their exchange, with the audience now riveted to the unplanned fireworks. When Craig asked whether Jason ever regretted not pursuing flashier, more transformative roles, Jason laughed bitterly, calling the suggestion shallow. He insisted he chose projects based on story quality, not vanity, and took pride in consistency. Craig, however, countered that consistency could easily slip into predictability, and viewers expected devolution from long-established stars. The words stung, and Jason shot back that chasing constant reinvention often led to hollow performances designed to impress rather than resonate. The verbal duel was relentless, with neither man willing to back down. Jason then turned philosophical, questioning whether the modern entertainment industry valued authenticity at all. He argued that social media and viral culture had dwarfed audience expectations, pressuring actors to constantly reinvent themselves for attention. Craig acknowledged the point but said that adaptability was the essence of staying relevant in any career. Jason's eyes flashed with irritation as he argued that true relevance came from honesty, not reinvention. The two men had turned a morning talk show segment into an unscripted cultural debate with no clear winner. The other hosts, now visibly uncomfortable, tried once more to defuse the situation by suggesting Jason share a funny behind-the-scenes story from his new project. Jason obliged briefly but quickly pivoted back, reiterating that he felt undermined by Craig's tone. He accused Craig of arriving with an agenda rather than genuine curiosity. Craig shook his head, calmly reiterating that asking hard questions was not an agenda but a responsibility. The exchange continued in circles, tension mounting with each turn, and viewers at home could sense the genuine animosity brewing. Social media was lighting up in real time, with hashtags about Jason's outburst trending even before the segment concluded. Some praised his passion and defense of artistry, while others criticized his defensiveness and inability to handle fair questions. The producers, caught in the middle, debated cutting the segment short but realized the clash was generating unprecedented engagement. For better or worse, the live drama was now must-watch television, and the decision was made to let it run, knowing the fallout would dominate headlines. Jason, feeling cornered, grew more candid than ever. He admitted that he was exhausted by years of being second-guessed, of critics downplaying his range, and of journalists framing his career in cliché-tilde copyright-esque. His voice cracked slightly with rawness, making clear that this was no longer about promotion but about years of pent-up frustration. Craig, though empathetic for a moment, quickly reasserted that criticism was an unavoidable part of fame. Jason shot back that criticism was fine, but mischaracterization was not, and he accused Craig of blurring the line between the two. The discussion shifted again when Craig asked whether Jason thought his defensiveness might alienate fans. Jason bristled, countering that fans understood authenticity and appreciated honesty. He argued that people could sense when someone was fake, and that his bluntness was part of why audiences still followed his work. Craig replied that while authenticity was admirable, delivery mattered, and too much edge could overshadow the art itself. Jason, visibly frustrated, rejected the notion, insisting that passion was inseparable from craft. At this point, Jason's voice rose slightly as he accused Craig of reducing him to a media caricature. He said he was tired of being painted as the sarcastic actor who never evolved, when in reality his evolution was internal, subtle, and deliberate. Craig responded coolly that public figures could not dictate perception, only influence it through their work. Jason shook his head in disbelief, muttering that the media thrived on tearing people down. The divide between them had become philosophical, a clash between media pragmatism and artistic pride. The other hosts finally stepped in with firmer voices, urging both men to move on. Jason, however, wasn't ready to let go, insisting that this was the first time he had been given a platform to directly challenge the narrative. He thanked Craig sarcastically for the opportunity to defend himself live, his words dripping with irony. Craig, refusing to be rattled, simply nodded and invited Jason to finish his thought. The standoff had reached its peak, with both the men dug deep into their convictions. Jason took a deep breath and delivered a passionate monologue about the value of restraint in acting, describing how silence, small gestures, and unspoken emotion often carried more power than explosive dialogue. He said the obsession with transformation was shallow compared to the mastery of subtlety. Craig, though visibly listening, finally countered that audiences wanted both a range in subtlety, transformation and consistency. Jason dismissed it as wishful thinking, insisting that true art could not be everything to everyone. The philosophical divide had never been clearer. By now, the tension had drawn in every eye in the studio. Crew members pretended to focus on technical tasks, but their ears were glued to the exchange. Jason's hands moved as he spoke, his voice sharp, while Craig's calm but firm responses provided a striking contrast. The two men represented opposite worlds colliding live on air. One, the defensive artist fighting for respect, the other, the journalist committed to unvarnished truth. The clash had moved far beyond Jason's project, becoming an unscripted cultural moment. Jason then criticized what he called the soundbite culture of modern interviews, accusing Craig of fishing for viral clips rather than engaging in genuine conversation. Craig denied it, saying that the questions were fair and reflective of public discourse. Jason, not convinced, argued that this was why artists were increasingly distrustful of media appearances, preferring controlled platforms where nuance wasn't lost. His words were sharp but resonated with many watching, who often complained about media sensationalism. Craig asked Jason whether, if given the chance, he would ever step back from interviews entirely. Jason paused, then admitted he had thought about it many times. He said the promotional machine was exhausting and often counterproductive, reducing art to talking points. Craig replied that interviews, for better or worse, were how artists reached the masses. Jason disagreed, saying that the work itself should be enough to speak for an artist. The back and forth revealed not only clashing egos but also deep systemic issues within entertainment. The segment's producers finally signaled to wrap things up, but Jason insisted on one final point. He told Craig that he respected journalism but expected respect in return, and that constant framing of his career as limited was unfair. Craig, to his credit, acknowledged Jason's success and praised his consistency, but still maintained that critical questions were necessary. The conversation ended not with reconciliation but with uneasy civility, both men sticking to their beliefs. The cameras faded, but the sparks lingered. Once the segment cut to commercial, The studio erupted in quiet murmurs as crew members tried to process what had just happened. Jason leaned back, visibly tense, while Craig maintained his professional calm. Off-camera, the other hosts tried to smooth things over with Jason, reminding him that audiences loved him regardless. Jason smiled faintly but remained shaken, clearly frustrated that a promotional spot had turned into a sparring match. Craig, meanwhile, prepared for the inevitable media storm that was already brewing online. Within minutes, clips of the clash began circulating across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Memes appeared almost instantly, with some mocking Jason's defensiveness and others celebrating his fiery authenticity. Hashtags like #Bateman vs Melvin and #TodayShowMeltdown trended for hours, making the clash one of the most talked about television moments of the week. Media outlets rushed to cover the exchange, each framing it differently, some as Jason losing his cool, others as Craig pushing too far. The narrative had taken on a life of its own. By afternoon, entertainment pundits weighed in, dissecting every word. Some argued that Jason had been unfairly targeted, while others insisted that Craig's questions were legitimate and Bateman's reaction disproportionate. The debate echoed the clash itself, with no consensus but plenty of passion. Jason's representatives released no immediate statement, fueling speculation that the actor wanted the moment to speak for itself. Craig, meanwhile, carried on with his usual duties, offering no apologies or clarifications, further fueling intrigue. Over the next few days, Jason was spotted at promotional events where reporters inevitably asked about the Today Show incident. He answered carefully, sometimes with humor, sometimes with irritation, but always reiterating that he stood by his words. The moment had undeniably overshadowed the project he was promoting, but paradoxically, it also brought him more attention than any scripted interview could have. Craig, for his part, received both praise and criticism but remained unshaken. His reputation as a tough interviewer only strengthened. In the end, the clash between Jason Bateman and Craig Melvin became more than just a viral TV moment. It embodied the eternal tension between art and media, authenticity and perception, passion and professionalism. Fans debated whether Jason's eruption was justified or excessive, while media insiders marveled at the unfiltered drama that had unfolded on live television. Though the segment was meant to highlight a new project, it instead exposed the raw human emotions behind fame, reminding everyone that even polished stars can erupt when pushed too far.